Before diving into the story, let me ask you this. How far would you go for a job? Not a dream job, mind you, but a paycheck to keep the lights on and the fridge stocked. Would you wear an itchy costume? Would you follow strange instructions without question? What if you couldn't leave, even if you wanted to? That's what happened to me when I started working at the Buc-ee's travel center just outside Dallas. At first glance, it seemed like an easy gig. Clean floors, stock shelves, smile at customers, and occasionally don the mascot costume. I needed the money, and honestly, how hard could it be to play a giant beaver for a few hours? But I wasn't prepared for what came with that costume. The rules, the whispers, the strange sense of déjà vu every time I clocked in. I'm writing this now because I don't know if I'll ever get out. You've been warned. It was a blistering June afternoon when I walked into Buc-ee's for my first shift. The air conditioning hit me like a blessed wall of cool air, and the cheerful chattering of customers buzzed throughout the store. Everything seemed normal until I was handed the key to the storage room. "This is where we keep the mascot costume," my manager, a wiry man named Dale, explained. His smile was tight, his eyes darting around like he expected something to leap out of the shelves. "You'll need to wear it during the afternoon rush." I nodded, trying to hide my unease. The costume, propped up in the corner, looked like it hadn't been cleaned in years. Its once bright fur was dull and matted, and the oversized beaver head seemed to glare at me with its faded plastic eyes. Do I clean it first?" I asked. Dale's expression hardened. "No, just wear it as it is." I frowned but said nothing. Jobs were hard to come by, and I wasn't about to lose this one over a dirty costume. But as I reached for it, something odd happened. The moment my fingers brushed the fur, I felt a static charge shoot up my arm. It wasn't painful, but it was enough to make me pull back. "You'll get used to it," Dale said quickly, ushering me out of the room. "Oh, and one more thing. When you wear it, make sure to follow the rules." I turned back to him, confused. "What rules?" Dale didn't answer. Instead, he handed me a laminated card and left without another word. I glanced down at the card. It was old and smudged, but the text was legible. Rule 1. Never put on the costume unless instructed by management. Rule 2. Once you're in the costume, stay in the mascot area. Rule 3. Do not speak while wearing the costume. Rule 4. If a child cries, leave immediately and take off the costume. Rule 5. Do not look at your reflection while wearing the costume. Rule 6. If a customer greets you by name, respond politely and leave the mascot area. Rule 7. Do not wear the costume past midnight. Rule 8. If you hear footsteps behind you, do not turn around. Rule 9. When removing the costume, never leave the head on the ground. The rules seemed ridiculous, almost like a joke, but Dale's nervous demeanor stuck with me. Something about the way he handed me the card, like he was passing off a curse, made my skin crawl. The clock struck 3 p.m., signaling the beginning of the afternoon rush. I had spent the earlier part of the day sweeping floors and refilling shelves, silently dreading the moment I'd have to put on the costume. The laminated card with the rules stayed folded in my back pocket, its presence weighing heavier on my mind with each passing minute. "Time to suit up, Abby," Dale called from across the store, his voice far too cheerful. He had an uncanny knack for showing up just when I was about to convince myself that maybe, just maybe, I could avoid the whole ordeal. I forced a smile and trudged toward the storage room. The air inside was stifling, heavy with the smell of mothballs and something faintly metallic. The costume stood where I'd left it, its head tilted slightly to the side as if watching me. "All right, let's do this," I muttered to myself, slipping my arms into the oversized sleeves. The fur was coarse and scratchy, and the suit itself felt heavier than it looked. When I pulled the headpiece over my face, the world shifted. Everything was dim, the eye holes too small to see clearly, and there was an odd hum, like static electricity, that seemed to come from inside the suit. Then, the whispers started. At first, I thought it was just the muffled sound of customers outside, their voices distorted by the thick fabric. But these whispers were different. They were close, intimate, like someone standing just behind me. "Rule 5, a voice hissed, barely audible. I froze. The card. I hadn't even read the rules since Dale handed them to me that morning. My hands fumbled for it, pulling it out of my pocket as quickly as I could. I scanned the list, my eyes landing on Rule 5. Do not look at your reflection while wearing the costume. "Why?" I whispered, as if the card could answer me. But there was no time to dwell on it. Dale's voice echoed from the hallway. "Abby, you ready? The kids are already lining up." I stumbled out of the storage room, the weight of the costume making every step feel like wading through wet cement. As I approached the mascot area, a small platform near the entrance, a little girl screamed and burst into tears. Instinctively, I moved toward her, my arms raised in a placating gesture. Her mother snatched her up and glared at me. "What's wrong with you?" she snapped before storming off. I glanced back at Dale, who was watching from behind the register. He looked pale, his eyes wide and frantic. He waved me over, gesturing for me to come closer. "Get out of there!" he hissed when I was within earshot. "You broke the rule. Take off the costume. Now." "But I didn't do anything," I protested, the heat inside the suit making it hard to breathe. Dale didn't answer. He just pointed to the laminated card, still in my hand. I glanced down at it and saw, to my horror, that the text under Rule 4, "If a child cries, leave immediately and take off the costume," was now smeared with what looked like fresh blood. I bolted back to the storage room, the blood-smudged rule card clutched in my hand. The air inside the costume felt heavier than ever, and every breath was labored. I yanked off the headpiece, the dim light of the room rushing in as I gasped for air. My heart pounded as I tossed the costume's head onto the nearby bench, watching it roll slightly before coming to a stop, its lifeless eyes staring at me. I glanced at the laminated card again. The blood was still there, seeping into the rule beneath it. I wiped it with my sleeve, but the smear wouldn't budge. It was as if the card had absorbed the blood, the letters underneath dark and warped. My fingers trembled as I turned it over, hoping for some kind of explanation. Nothing. Dale burst into the room, slamming the door behind him. His usual cocky demeanor was gone, replaced with an expression of pure fear. "What the hell were you thinking?" he hissed, his voice a harsh whisper. "I didn't do anything," I snapped, holding up the card. This wasn't on me. The kid cried before I even moved." Dale ran a hand through his thinning hair and sighed, his shoulders sagging. "Look, Abby, this isn't just some dumb corporate thing, all right? These rules..." He gestured toward the card. "They're not suggestions. They're protections." "Protections from what?" I demanded, my voice cracking. His gaze darted toward the costume, now slumped in the corner like a dead body. "From whatever's tied to that thing. We've all had to wear it at some point. But you made them notice you." "Who's them?" I asked, the hairs on the back of my neck standing up. Dale didn't answer. Instead, he grabbed the headpiece and held it up, angling it so I could see inside. At first, it looked normal. Just a padded interior and the faint outline of the mesh eye holes. But then I saw them. Scratch marks. Dozens. Maybe hundreds of tiny claw-like scratches on the fabric, like something had tried to claw its way out. "What the hell is this?" I whispered, my stomach churning. "That's why you don't look at your reflection," Dale muttered. "Rule 5 isn't just about avoiding bad luck or some nonsense. It's about keeping them from seeing you seeing them. You're saying something's inside the costume." "It's not the costume," Dale said, his voice low. "It's the thing that wears it when no one else does." The storage room door creaked open, making us both jump. No one was there, but a faint, sweet smell wafted in, like rotting fruit left out in the sun. Dale's face turned ashen. "They're here," he whispered. "You broke the rules, Abby. Now you've got to fix it." "Fix it how?" I asked, my voice barely audible over the pounding of my heart. Dale handed me the headpiece. "You've got to finish the shift, all of it. And for God's sake, don't break another rule." The faint whispering started again, low and persistent, like voices drifting in from another room. I slipped the headpiece back on, my vision narrowing through the eye holes. The room seemed darker now, the corners shrouded in shadows that flickered and moved when I wasn't looking directly at them. "Just stay in the costume," Dale said, his voice trembling, "and don't look in any mirrors." The rest of the night felt like walking through a waking nightmare. With the costume fully on, the world around me seemed distorted. The eye holes blurred my vision, but it wasn't just the costume. The lights inside the store flickered faintly, casting long, twitching shadows across the aisles. Every sound was amplified: the buzz of the overhead fluorescents, the hum of the refrigerators, and the distant shuffling of something just out of sight. I focused on the rules, clutching the card like a lifeline. Rule 6 loomed in my mind. Never turn your back on the mascot when you aren't wearing it. It didn't make sense. How could the costume move if I wasn't wearing it? I decided not to dwell on the question. Instead, I moved to the main floor, where the soft beep of the automatic doors echoed, startling me. A lone customer entered. He was middle-aged, wearing a faded plaid shirt and jeans, and his face seemed blurred. Not in the way you'd expect from poor vision or bad lighting, but as if his features refused to stay in focus. My stomach churned. He walked straight to the candy aisle, his movements jerky, like a puppet on tangled strings. "Hello, sir," I called, trying to keep my voice steady. "Let me know if you need help finding anything." The man didn't reply. He just stopped in front of the shelves, tilting his head slightly, as though listening to something I couldn't hear. Then he grabbed a candy bar and turned to face me. I froze. His eyes were wrong, dark and hollow, as if there was nothing behind them. "Will this do?" he rasped, his voice crackling like a distant radio transmission. "Yes," I stammered. Just bring it to the counter." The man's mouth stretched into a grotesque grin, and he shuffled toward me, his steps too light, almost floating. I rang up the candy bar as quickly as I could. The register beeped, but no total appeared on the screen. The drawer opened anyway, revealing a single coin, a tarnished penny that looked as though it had been pulled from a grave. The man dropped it into his palm, his cold fingers brushing mine. "Thank you," he said, his grin widening impossibly. Then he turned and walked toward the exit, his figure fading into the shadows before he reached the door. The automatic doors never opened. I took a step back, my hands trembling. I looked down at the register. The tarnished penny was gone. Dale emerged from the storage room, his face pale. "You didn't follow the 7th rule, did you?" "What 7th rule?" I asked, panic rising in my chest. "The card only has 6. Dale shook his head, pulling out his own card. It looked older, worn and yellowed with age. At the bottom, beneath the 6th rule, was another. Do not serve the dead. My legs nearly buckled. He's not supposed to be here yet, Dale muttered, running a hand through his hair. Not tonight. What do you mean, yet? What is happening? I demanded. Dale looked at me with hollow eyes. You've been marked, Abby. Once you've served them, they don't forget. The costume can protect you for now, but only if you follow the rest of the rules perfectly. My heart pounded as the whispers started again, louder this time, echoing from the aisles. Shadows moved on their own, inching closer with every blink. I clutched the headpiece tighter, dread sinking into my stomach. Get back to your post, Dale urged, and don't let the costume out of your sight. I hurried back to the counter, clutching the mascot's head like it was a shield. The whispers grew louder as I walked, trailing behind me like faint echoes of conversations I couldn't quite hear. Shadows flickered in the corners of the store, and the fluorescent lights overhead buzzed angrily, casting uneven patches of light and darkness. I sat on the stool behind the counter, trembling as I slid the mascot's head back over mine. The moment it clicked into place, the whispers stopped, replaced by an oppressive silence that pressed against my ears like cotton. My breathing echoed loudly inside the headpiece, and my vision blurred through the scratched eye holes. Everything outside felt muted, like I was watching a surreal dream unfold. Dale paced near the stockroom, muttering under his breath. His movements were frantic, his head snapping toward every sound, every flicker of movement. They're getting bolder, he muttered, more to himself than to me. They can feel the rules bending. What do you mean? I asked, my voice muffled by the costume. He turned to me, his eyes wide and bloodshot. The rules keep them in check. If they sense weakness, if they sense someone breaking even one, they'll use it to push their way through. Push through what? The veil, he said, his voice trembling. This place, it's not just a store. It's a boundary, a thin spot between here and there. The costume keeps you safe because they can't see you when you're wearing it. But the second you slip up, they'll know. I felt cold sweat trickling down my back. And you've been here how long? Dale laughed bitterly. Too long. I've tried to leave, but every time I take off the costume, I find myself right back here the next night. It doesn't let you go unless you play by its rules. I swallowed hard, the weight of his words settling in my chest like a lead ball. I glanced at the clock on the wall. It was nearly midnight, the final stretch of my shift. All I had to do was keep my head down and follow the rules. A loud crash from one of the aisles made us both jump. I turned instinctively toward the sound but caught myself before standing. Rule 5. Do not leave the counter unless absolutely necessary, and only after 3 a.m. Dale was already moving, his steps careful and deliberate. Stay here, he hissed. No matter what you hear, don't leave this spot. I nodded, gripping the counter tightly. The shadows in the aisles seemed to ripple, and the air grew heavy with a metallic tang, like the smell of old blood. My heart pounded as Dale disappeared into the darkness, his flashlight beam bouncing erratically as he moved. Minutes felt like hours. The clock ticked louder than I thought possible, each second dragging out into an eternity. Then I heard it, a low, guttural growl from somewhere deep within the store. My stomach turned, and my grip on the counter tightened. It wasn't Dale. Whatever it was big. Too big. The growl turned into a snarl, followed by the sound of something heavy dragging across the floor. My vision blurred through the mascot's eye holes, but I could just make out a shape moving in the darkness. It was massive, its outline shifting and impossible to define. It seemed to flicker in and out of existence, like a broken film reel. Dale? I whispered, my voice trembling. Is that you? No answer. Only the growl, now closer, echoing through the aisles like a predator stalking its prey. I clutched the mascot tighter, my breath coming in shallow gasps. The rules kept repeating in my mind like a mantra, but they felt fragile, like they could shatter at any moment. The growls faded into silence, but the tension in the air remained heavy, almost suffocating. The store's fluorescent lights buzzed louder, flickering more frequently, as though they were struggling to maintain their hold against the encroaching darkness. I stayed rooted to the stool behind the counter, Dale's warning echoing in my mind. Do not leave this spot. But then, I heard something that made my stomach drop. A faint, rasping voice calling my name. Abby! Abby! Come here! It sounded distorted, like someone speaking through a broken radio. My skin crawled as I tried to convince myself it wasn't real. I couldn't risk it. I couldn't break another rule. But the voice came again, clearer this time, and unmistakably Dale's. Abby, I need help. It's stuck. I can't get it to stop. Panic surged through me. Dale's voice was desperate, and I could hear the faint scrape of something heavy being dragged. Against every instinct screaming at me to stay put, I found myself sliding off the stool. My feet touched the floor, and the mascot costume felt suddenly heavier, almost like it was trying to hold me back. Rule 5. Do not leave the counter unless absolutely necessary, and only after 3 a.m. I glanced at the clock. It was 12:47 a.m. I hesitated, gripping the edge of the counter as my mind raced. What if Dale really needed help? What if breaking this rule was the only way to save him? But the rules were clear. The last thing Dale had told me was to stay put. I had to trust him. Then I saw it, a faint beam of light flickering in the far aisle. Dale's flashlight. It wobbled as though he were barely holding it steady, and the scraping sound grew louder. Abby, please, it's coming! The voice was closer now, almost on top of me. I couldn't ignore it any longer. I took a cautious step forward, and then another. The sound of my own breathing filled the mascot's headpiece as I crept around the counter. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat a warning to turn back. But I couldn't. As I reached the aisle, I froze. Dale's flashlight lay on the ground, flickering weakly. Next to it, a large, dark stain spread across the linoleum floor, glistening under the dim light. My stomach churned as the metallic tang of blood hit my nose. But Dale was nowhere to be seen. Dale? My voice was barely a whisper. Suddenly, the shadows around me seemed to shift, pooling together and rising like smoke. A figure emerged, its outline flickering and indistinct, but its eyes, two burning pinpricks of light, pierced through the darkness. It wasn't Dale. It wasn't human. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over the mascot's oversized feet. The figure took a step forward, and with it came a sound, a deep, resonant hum that vibrated through my chest. It was then that I realized the rules weren't just arbitrary. They were barriers, keeping things like this at bay. I bolted back to the counter, my breath hitching as I practically dove onto the stool. The mascot's headpiece felt suffocating, but I didn't dare take it off. The figure didn't follow me, but I could feel its presence lingering, watching. The clock ticked on, agonizingly slow. The clock read 2:59 a.m. when the suffocating heaviness in the air reached its peak. The store was silent now, the kind of silence that felt alive, humming with something unseen. Every aisle seemed to stretch endlessly into darkness, and even the mascot costume felt tighter, heavier, as though it were molding itself to my body. The rules had held me together so far, but something about the stillness warned me that I wasn't safe yet. A shuffling sound broke the silence. My breath caught as I realized it was coming from the far end of the store, near the storage area. I clenched the edge of the counter, unwilling to move, but unable to ignore the growing noise. It wasn't just shuffling anymore. It was accompanied by faint whispers, incoherent but insistent. Rule 6. Do not acknowledge the whispers if you hear them after 2:30 a.m. I closed my eyes and pressed my hands over the mascot's ears, trying to block it out. But the whispers grew louder, closer, swirling around me like a rising tide. They weren't just voices, they were memories, fragments of conversations, laughter, arguments. Faces flashed in my mind, faces I didn't recognize but felt as though I should. Employees, maybe. Customers. The sheer weight of their collective presence made my head spin. "Abby," one voice rose above the others. It was Dale's. "You're not listening." I shook my head violently, gripping the edge of the counter harder. My pulse thundered in my ears. Ignore it, ignore it, ignore it. But how could I ignore Dale? The only person who seemed to know the horrors of this place. The voice became sharper, more insistent. "Abby, you have to see for yourself. Look in the mirror." My heart sank. There was a mirror behind the counter, placed strategically so employees could watch for shoplifters. I had avoided looking at it all night, afraid of what I might see. But now Dale's voice had planted a seed of doubt. What if I needed to look? What if understanding the whispers, the rules, depended on it? "Don't," a new voice whispered. This one was unfamiliar, soft, almost childlike. "You'll see too much." I couldn't take it anymore. Slowly, I turned my head toward the mirror. My breath hitched as my reflection stared back at me. Or what should have been my reflection. The mascot's grinning face filled the glass, but behind it, layered over my own image, were dozens of others. Faces twisted in fear, anger, sorrow. Some were faint, barely discernible, while others pressed against the glass as though trying to break free. I scrambled back, knocking the stool over. The mirror cracked, and the whispers exploded into a deafening roar. The lights flickered violently, casting the store in strobe-like flashes of light and shadow. I clutched the mascot's headpiece, trying to steady myself, but it felt like it was suffocating me, tightening with every breath. "Abby!" Dale's voice rang out, clearer than ever, but I didn't know if it was real or another trick. "You have to finish the shift. It's almost 3 o'clock. The clock read 2:59 a.m. The longest minute of my life stretched on as the shadows seemed to close in around me. All I could do was hold my ground, clinging to the rules like a lifeline. The final minute passed. The clock struck 3 a.m., and the whispers stopped. The lights stabilized, and the oppressive weight lifted. But the relief was short-lived. I heard footsteps behind me, slow, deliberate. "Abby," Dale's voice said softly. But when I turned, it wasn't Dale standing there. Standing there, illuminated by the flickering fluorescent lights, was a figure wearing the same mascot costume I had on, a grinning beaver with oversized teeth and lifeless eyes. But something was off. The fur on the costume looked matted and aged, and the head tilted unnaturally to one side. "Who are you?" I whispered, my voice muffled inside my own mascot head. The figure didn't respond immediately. Instead, it raised a gloved hand and slowly removed the beaver head. Underneath was Dale, but his face was pale, and his eyes lacked their usual spark. "Dale?" I gasped. He shook his head slowly. "Not exactly." A chill ran down my spine. "What's going on?" He stepped closer, and I instinctively backed away. "You broke too many rules, Abby. The balance has been disturbed." "I don't understand." My voice trembled. "I tried to follow them. You looked into the mirror." He interrupted, his tone flat. "You left the counter before 3 a.m. You acknowledge the whispers. Each rule you break weakens the barrier. The barrier? I echoed, confusion and fear swirling within me. He sighed, a sound that seemed to echo beyond the confines of the store. This place stands on a threshold, a thin veil between our world and others. The rules are there to keep things separated, to maintain order. I felt the weight of his words pressing down on me. But why me? I didn't sign up for this. None of us did, he said softly. I was once in your position, just as someone was before me. My heart sank. Is there a way out? He studied me for a moment. There is a choice. The barrier requires a guardian, someone bound by the rules to keep the veil intact. A guardian? I whispered. You mean I'm trapped here? Unless you pass the mantle, he replied. How? Desperation tinged my voice. By finding someone to take your place, he said, his eyes reflecting a hint of sorrow. Someone willing to accept the rules. I recoiled at the implication. You want me to condemn someone else? He placed a hand on my shoulder. It's the way it's always been. A cycle. One exits, another enters. I pulled away. There has to be another way. Dale's form began to fade, his edges blurring. The barrier is weakening. Decide quickly, or the choice will be made for you. As he vanished, the store around me shifted. The aisles stretched impossibly long, shadows writhing between the shelves. Whispering voices grew louder, overlapping into a cacophony of incomprehensible words. I clutched the laminated rule card, now warm to the touch. The weight of responsibility pressed heavily upon me. Could I, in good conscience, pass this curse onto another? The store's automatic doors slid open, and a young woman stepped in, her eyes scanning the interior with naive curiosity. Hello? She called out. Is anyone here? I'm looking for the manager. I was told to come in tonight for training. Her gaze settled on me, and she offered a friendly smile. Oh, there you are. I'm Jenna. I think we spoke on the phone? My mouth went dry. Images flashed in my mind, an unbroken cycle of guardians trapped by circumstance, each forced to make the same harrowing decision. Welcome, Jenna, I managed to say, my voice barely audible. She approached the counter. This place is huge. Is it always this quiet at night? I looked into her bright, expectant eyes, weighed down by the gravity of the moment. Sometimes, I replied. She noticed the mascot costume. Do I get to wear that? Looks fun. I hesitated, the laminated card practically burning in my hand. There are some things you should know first. Handing her the rule card, I watched as she read through the list, her expression shifting from amusement to confusion. These are peculiar, she remarked. Is this some kind of hazing? I forced a weak smile. I thought the same thing at first, but it's important you follow them, exactly as they're written. She chuckled nervously. You're serious, aren't you? I nodded. Very. She glanced around the empty store. Is Dale here? He was the one who hired me. He had to step out, I said, avoiding her gaze. The lights flickered, and a low hum resonated through the building. The shadows seemed to gather at the edges of our vision. What's that? Jenna asked, her voice tinged with unease. Please, put on the costume, I urged. It's for your safety. Confusion clouded her features, but she complied, perhaps sensing the urgency in my tone. As she donned the mascot head, I felt a strange sensation, a lightness, as if a heavy burden was being lifted from my shoulders. The whispers began to fade, and the store's oppressive atmosphere eased. The cycle was continuing, but I was stepping out of it. Abby, what's happening? Jenna's muffled voice came from inside the costume. I took a deep breath. "Just remember to follow the rules. You'll be okay." Turning away, I headed toward the exit. The automatic door slid open smoothly, a cool breeze brushing against my face. Outside, the first light of dawn was breaking, painting the sky with hues of pink and orange. As I walked away from Buc-ee's, a mix of relief and guilt washed over me. I was free, but at what cost? Some burdens are too heavy to bear alone, and some choices haunt us long after they're made. I could only hope that Jenna would fare better than I did, that perhaps she would find another way, break the cycle instead of perpetuating it. But as the sun rose higher, casting long shadows behind me, I couldn't shake the feeling that some doors, once opened, can never truly be closed. In the quiet moments between reality and the unknown, we often find ourselves facing choices that test the very core of our humanity. Sometimes the rules are all that stand between order and chaos, and sometimes breaking them is the only way to forge a new path.